Hello everyone, welcome to GatsbyConf. My name is Peters. I'm a technical lead for the open source side at Gatsby, and I'll be showing you how to avoid the most common performance pitfalls with Gatsby. Well, actually, you can apply them everywhere on the web because they're so common and they're not just tied to Gatsby. And I want to show you gatsbyconf.com because that's the site that I've used along this presentation to apply these fixes to. So you have a good idea on how to apply them to your site as well, to make your Gatsby site even better. So let's have a look. As you can see, we have a regular marketing site, logo, some headlines, CTA button, a video even, registration, lots of images. So it's a good candidate to go through. And I want to start with something controversial. You might not need that score of 100 on Lighthouse to get a performant website. And you're like, what? I need that score of 100 for Google. They're using it for my SEO. Well, it's actually not true. Like, that's where the nuance comes in. You have lab data and you have field data. And Google uses field data to measure performance. So lab data is things like Lighthouse, web page test. They basically run in a controlled environment. And what do I mean with a controlled environment? It's the same machine, it's the same network setup, it's the same CPU, like everything is always the same, and it's good for benchmarking. So let's say you run it every hour, every day, or every commit, and you see from build A to build B, your score or your LCP went from 2 seconds to 3 seconds. Then you know a regression happens. You know that you have to fix it. But still, it is controlled, so you don't know. So you have set up all the variables. And where with field data, it's real users. So it's actually people going to your e-commerce site, buying things, and they might not have a controlled environment like you do. Like they might be somewhere in the field, a forest, having like a bad internet connection, or have like a very cheap phone, or maybe they use iPhones. Like there's so much variations, and you need to know about those things. And tools to measure field data are, for example, Crux, Chrome User Experience Report. You have Google Analytics. You have SpeedCurve Lux, Akamai Ampulse. Like there's many tools who can do field data, but it's very important to have it. Because I want to show you an example with gatsbyconf.com, where on the left you see the field data, and on the right you see the lab data. And lab data says, your Lighthouse score is amazing, score of 93. And I'm like, hell yeah. But then when you look at the left, we see the field data. Not so good, like actually pretty bad. Like FCP, LCP, they're 4 seconds. Man, I got work to do. So this is a good example where Lighthouse told me I was good, but actually, in reality, not so good. But that's where the nuance comes in even more. So the data that I looked at was Crux, and it's lagging behind. So basically it goes, it's the data from the previous month. So even if I did a change last week, Crux will not have changed. So that's why it's important to measure yourself. And this is where Chrome has the Web Vitals SDK, at least that's what I call it. And it's available on Google Chrome/Web Vitals. And it's basically a tool or a library that has all the correct functions in place. So you can do get FID, get CLS, get TBT, like all those things. And you get those numbers and you can can beacon it to Google Analytics, your data lake, like whatever you want. And you don't have to think about, okay, how do I calculate this and that? No, it's created by Google. They know how to measure it with Chrome, and they also have polyfills for like Safari and other browsers, which is pretty cool. And if you use Gatsby, then we even have a better treat for you. If you use Gatsby plugin GTM or Gatsby plugin Analytics, you just have to enable Web Vitals tracking, and then we send you the correct events as well. So I did that for GatsbyConf, and this is data from one day. So basically yesterday, because I forgot to turn it on, and I wanted this data for my talk, so I waited 1 day to get this. You can see LCP, CLS, and FID are tracked, but still the average LCP is 2.7 seconds, not so great. CLS, that's okay. FID, also not so good. So we can see that Crux wasn't lying to us. Like, we did improvements, but still it's not as good as we want to. So then we can go to Lighthouse and it can tell us, okay, what's the LCP and what's the element that triggers LCP and what triggers CLS. And we can go diving ourselves. So let's do the test. Okay, let's see if Lighthouse is right. So what I usually do is go to performance, fast 3G, 4 times slowdown, and then I refresh the page. And then I can see like this piece of text changed, and because of this change, everything got pushed down a little bit, but also the headline changed a little bit. And the reason why I use fast 3G and 4 times slowdown is because it exaggerates the changes, but also you might have users with such specs. So it's very good to test on those. And then if I go to my other state, so basically when you register, then we have a different state. So we show the raffle ticket and not the register button anymore. So if you go to refresh, you can see we start with the register now CTA, and then the raffle comes in. So now we have a good idea where those slow numbers come from. Like, the page itself loads pretty quickly, but then you can see that swapping the raffle ticket takes a while. So we can even see 2 to 3 seconds. So that correlates to what I'm seeing as LCP in Google Analytics. So we found our problem here, and that's something that Lighthouse cannot measure. Well, it's not as easy to measure. Like, they have user flows that you can write to do that, but it's difficult. So that's why field data is so important. So this leads me to font loading, one of the hardest problems to solve in web development. And I can talk a lot about font loading, but this talk is too short. So I'll give you a quick summary, and then we will probably publish a blog post sooner to explain this more in depth. So we were told we could just add font display swap, and that's what we done with GatsbyConf. But that's not enough. We still see layout shift and CLS happen, because font display only work for font loading. Other things to think about is host your fonts on the same domain. Why? If you use Google CDN, you already lost 300 milliseconds. We have to do a DNS lookup, we have to do an SSL handshake to connect to the new domain. So if you host it on your same domain, you already done that. So you don't need to pay the extra cost. Preload your fonts. Tell the browser like, hey, can you please prioritize these fonts for me? And then another one is control font loading. Font display is one of them. Font phase observer is another, and then font size adjust is something new that you can use too. But more about that in a blog post. Another thing is to consider is optimize your render. In GatsbyConf website, we had this big component. At the top, we had the context, and somewhere below, we were using the context. The problem is when the context changed, we had to re-render the whole tree. Like, we had the stars at the top, 2022 images, all those things had to be re-rendered. So if you look at React DevTools, we see at the bottom colors happening, not too expensive, like the render took 5 milliseconds, not too bad, but still there were a lot of components that re-rendered for nothing. If you look at the new code, we remove the registration code to a new component. We call it register raffle section. We basically use context, and then the same code happens when it's registered. We show the raffle. If not, we show the register button. Now, if you look at DevTools, we see way less colors changed because only the raffle component needed to be re-rendered. So we dropped from 5 to 3 milliseconds. Not huge, but every bit helps. Then another way that's pretty cool is don't forget about the past. Before React, we were using CSS to our advantage. So basically adding a CSS class to the body, and based on that class, we were shifting layouts around. You can still do this with React. Basically, when you have something in local storage or cookie, you can add a class to the body and then change behavior of your layouts. This is great for cookie banners, interstitials, A/B testing. Basically, when we look back at the raffle ticket, we can see that now the register and the raffle ticket swaps. Let's reduce that with the body class. And the problem here is that React relies on JavaScript. So we need to download all the JavaScript, hydrate, and then we can swap the raffle. Not great. So instead, we basically add a piece to the bottom of Gatsby SSR on render body, and we inject some small script component. And the script basically just checks local storage. If it's true, then I add the as is registered component, class name to the body. And then we can change the register raffle section component to use raffle prompt and register CTA class names, so we can target in the CSS in the middle. So basically, by default, raffle prompt is display none, and then when we are registered, we say register CTA is none, and raffle prompt is display grid. And that's how we can get a great experience. Let's see this in action. So as you can see, if I now refresh, the layout is stable. Of course, you see the layout shift for the font, but then the raffle ticket shows up. Awesome. This is what we want. And basically, we don't need SSR, it's still static, and we have this great experience. So basically, if we go to the script tag here, you can see the JavaScript is here and the as is registered ticket, a class name is there as well. Okay, awesome. When we talk to marketeers, content editors, business people, they want their metrics. We need to know what the user is doing, what works, what doesn't work to make the website better and better. But we have to remember, if everything is important, nothing is. We have to defer all the things. Basically, all third-party scripts need to run after hydration. When the site is interactive, then we want to start measuring. We don't want tracking scripts to fight with the network of our users. So let's say I have to download 3 JavaScript files, 3 images, and then we have to download GTM, Facebook Pixel, whatever and whatever. This will slow down the whole website, basically for no user benefit. So be smart about this. What can I defer, what not? That's just important. Animations. Don't do JavaScript animations. Use CSS animations and the Web Animations API to get performant animations. Else, if you don't do them, your CPU will be very high, battery will go lower and lower on your device, on your user devices, and basically the site will feel very slow. Check your oversized libraries. I cannot emphasize this enough, how many people I see using Axios or big animation libraries. They're all good, but please check bundle phobia on how big they are and if they make sense to you. For example, Axios, why not use Fetch? Fetch is shipped by default by the browser, and Gatsby polyfills this for older browsers. And also something that I want to emphasize is don't treat your top content equally to your footer content. So basically on the top, use placeholders, make everything like steady and fast, but at the bottom, maybe don't use placeholders. Just do whenever the user is almost there, will show up the full image. Why is this beneficial? Because the placeholder images are base64 encoded or background colors, and they add extra weight to the HTML. The less we can ship to the user, the better. So keep that in mind. And with defer all the things, I also mean mostly we think about using React Lazy to lazy load components and so on, but there's something else you can do. Like if you use things like use effect to do an animation. In this example, we download the utils animation, which also downloads motion, and then the extra code to do our animation. But technically, because we're in a use effect, it doesn't matter if it loads instantly, a second, 2 seconds. So what if we move everything to a dynamic import and then run it? That means that all the animation logic is outside of the main path. So we render, react. It doesn't have to parse and compile the motion library, and then boom, when it's ready, we do it, and then we don't have to fight with the immediate or the initial bootstrapping time. So how can Gatsby make your life easier? Well, we're working on a script component. We're also looking into special performance tooling to diagnose common mistakes. So basically all the things I talked about, we want to tell you about these things. Like, hey, maybe use this or that, so you don't have to figure these things out on your own, because we can do a lot of things from a framework level. And then another thing is what we're actively looking for is partial and progressive hydration. For example, for the Gatsby conf site, the only things that actually need to be hydrated is a registration form. And that's technically it. So we want to work on those things. Thank you for listening. My name is Peters, and I'll see you in the Q&A.
Stay tuned for the live Q&A.